Mass Effect, released in 2007, set the bar for what players expected from RPGs during the 360 era. It was entirely voice-acted, used a branching conversation system that allowed for different outcomes in each situation, and promised to have narrative ties that would last the entire trilogy. Pitched over dinner by Casey Hudson as a sci-fi RPG, he believed that it would become a mainstream phenomenon and a must-have game for the Xbox 360. Fast forward 14 years later, and we're on the precipice of seeing Mass Effect Legendary Edition release on modern-day consoles and PC to much fanfare, meaning I'd say the entire BioWare team delivered on that goal. We've been given early access to some footage that showcases dramatic updates to the original Mass Effect and a peek at how Mass Effect 2 and 3 will also be improved. But let's start with a closer look at the original, the one that needed the most care, to take a look at how it's been updated. Beginning with the combat sequence, we get our first look at the updated HUD, and yes, your weapons will still use a cooldown system and not thermal clips like in Mass Effect 2 and 3. In addition, the weapons use a different reticle, and there are no longer class-specific weapon restrictions that make certain guns unusable for certain classes. But let's talk about the textures for a second. Using AI upscaling, the new look of this garage scene on Noveria is night and day when compared to the 360. The specifics may appear subtle, but one I can point out in this scene is a much more natural, soft effect of the lighting. They're using ambient occlusion in the scene, which you can see more clearly on the boxes that emit shadows. Stepping away from combat for a moment, we also got a tour of the main hub in Noveria. This footage opens with an amazing look at the new female Shepard model as she exits the elevator. The character models looked a lot better in Mass Effect 3, and with the new character model feature, you can start Mass Effect 1 as that iconic female Shepard. The lighting and camera placement is changed here too, putting you a little bit closer to the characters as they move through the levels or down elevators. The Novaria Port has been heavily reworked in Legendary Edition, and you see some small elements as you exit the elevator. Couches have cushions, and the textures on the walls and concrete floors have been reworked. In the main hallway, they've added light fixtures across the entire room and even removed large pieces of geometry that previously would break up your path. Here's what BioWare's Mac Walters had to say about why the wall was removed.
The wall and why the wall came down in Noveria, right? You'll see them probably more so throughout Mass Effect 1. They were really just meant for streaming occlusion, essentially sightlines, right? In large open spaces, which we had quite a few of in Mass Effect 1. Whatever the game has to render is going to start to hit your performance. So when you have a wall there, when you come off the elevator, it just means that you don't have to show the whole level and load the whole level and have everything on screen as soon as you get off the elevator. And so the art team wanted to try taking it out, and it worked great, and I think it looks awesome.
When you reach the garage with the Mako inside, you'll also notice an additional lighting in the room and objects that have been completely remodeled. Even on the Mako, there's texture and dirt on the tires, and it looks a lot more rugged and used. Looking at the provided Mako footage is really interesting to me because this is one of the key areas of the original that needed work. The original Mako was floaty, bouncy, and while I can't comment on how the Mako controls now, as I haven't played it yet, we did get to see two driving sections. The first is directly after you leave the Novaria Port, and again the new textures on the ice-covered mountain are immediately visible, but if you watch the Mako drive, you might notice some changes, like a boost feature. Here's BioWare producer Renata Cronin on how the Mako changed.
It is so much better now. We've made it better in that it handles better, it targets better. You know, we changed up the reticle when you're shooting with the Mako now so that it actually hits where you're aiming, which is very awesome, because it didn't used to do that before. You know, we've added boosters to it as well. We're still in the process of sort of tweaking it a little bit, so this clip right here is not necessarily representative of the end product, but it's got all the major improvements that we wanted. Now we're just playing around with, you know, how weighty does it feel, because it's still a little bit floaty, as you can see, but now it feels more, you know, like you're driving a tank and not, you know, the car that floats for some reason.
Later, we also got a peek at a Thresher Maw fight on Antibar that shows another gameplay addition. Yes, the Thresher Maw still moves around, but now with a trail so you have a clearer picture of where they're headed with each movement. That should result in fewer instant deaths. There's also a new sensory tentacle phase to the encounter, where you need to avoid the maw and the tentacles as you battle. At the finale, you can notice the plumes of smoke have a lot more body to them also. I'm a little more hopeful about the Mako after seeing this footage. All of this is on top of massively decreased loading times provided by hardware advances like faster hard drives. This is a side-by-side shot of the original and Legendary Edition. As you can see, you can choose to instantly be at your destination, while in the original, you would be waiting for a significant period of time. And two smaller but important systems we gotta look at were the inventory system and character creator. So the inventory system has been reworked, and it seems you can more easily sort, dismantle, and compare your gear for you and your squad mates. This also applies to the store, which looks to give you different view options depending on what you're looking to buy and sell. The character creator, which allows you to create a character before you begin playing any of the games in the trilogy, is also drastically updated. The original benefits the most from this, and I've gone back to see how close I can get the 2007 character models to the new models, but the options just aren't comparable. There are more hairstyles, more makeup options, more skin tone options, and you're really allowed to go all out. Looking at Mass Effect 2, we didn't see nearly as much, but there's a lot more detail in what we did see than I expected. The outfits have been reworked, meaning no more orange suits, and all of the outfits available in Mass Effect 3 are now available in Mass Effect 2. And while I don't have any fish at this point in my Mass Effect 2 save, what you should really be looking at is in the new game, as there are improved reflections on the tank itself.
So what we're doing there is instead of doing a screen space reflection, we're doing what's called a render to texture. So you're basically just re-rendering the world in a texture in that space. And so you have to be very careful where you can use them, because you can imagine a scenario where if you use it in the wrong space, you're basically paying twice for your rendering, right?
The rest of the Normandy benefits tremendously from the facelift. In Lair of the Shadow Broker, the lighting is changed as you can see in the distance, but most changes in this expansion are subtle. The 4K assets are very apparent, and they may have added a depth of field effect, which I noticed on the ship. In addition, there are a few moments where the new lighting reflects off of surfaces, like at the end of this footage when the array is retracted. Here's BioWare producer Brennan Holmes with a few thoughts.
Mostly it's just graphical improvements here, right? So like on the gameplay side, it's mostly just been bug fixes for Mass 2. We're pretty happy with kind of where Mass 2 is at, but you can see sort of improved visual effects here. Lighting's a lot better. I think I could probably talk a little bit about the DLC stuff as well in here. So it's now embedded in various stores, or you can get it through upgrades in the Normandy. Like DLC is always the fun time when it's, you got all your tools and everything, and everyone just kind of goes crazy. And I remember them pitching this concept around like, yeah, let's have a fight on the outside of the ship, and it'll be like, in the lightning storm with all this stuff going on. And that was just a really cool concept.
And last but certainly not least is Mass Effect 3, which does benefit from all the texture updates, character model updates, and anti-aliasing improvements. But because it was so polished at launch, I asked BioWare what players can expect for the third entry in the series. Here's what Mac Walters had to say about this already stellar entry.
I think it's in the sort of global improvements where you're going to feel it in ME3. The interesting thing there is we knew that Mass Effect 1 would need the most work, but we also wanted to leave everything on the table if there were things that we really wanted to improve there. And the more we sort of dug into 3, we felt like, look, we are more at risk of taking something that was pretty damn good and making it worse, or just making a lateral move where it's different, but is it actually better? And a lot of times we just said, yeah, no, it's fine. Gameplay, everything is good the way it is. There were bugs, and we couldn't fix all of them, but we fixed a lot of them, sort of thing. And we would find them all throughout all 3 games, sort of thing. So I think that's another thing. And you probably would go, oh yeah, this feels less buggy. But if you were to play them side by side, you'd be like, oh, okay, yes, I see what you did there. Putting them all together with all of the DLC, including things like, armor packs and alternate appearances and stuff like that. And when you get all of that content together And there is less of that sort of what I would call friction in Mass Effect 1 that kind of is like, oh boy, I like it, but it's really making me work for it. It does feel like a whole experience. It together feels very obviously modernized, but it just feels more than more than some of its parts.
I was already sold on playing through the series once more, and the Legendary Edition gives me the perfect opportunity. The first Mass Effect might just be my favorite game ever made because of the promise of biotic-powered gameplay, stellar storytelling unlike anything I had seen at the time, and space exploration to unique planets. I look forward to jumping back in this May. A special thank you to BioWare for providing the commentary today and for making this amazing trilogy. It is honestly a game that will always be special to me, and I'm so happy to see the amount of care going into this remaster. I'll be doing a full performance review on the final code, so keep an eye out to see how it runs on each platform. In the meantime, if you're looking for performance reviews, keep an eye on IGN Games, as myself and my colleague Michael release new episodes each week, so be sure to subscribe for more videos like this. And a personal note from me to you, thank you for watching. I just love making this series. For more on all things gaming, we've got you covered at IGN.